Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Fendler. I'm the principal managing director at Hub Investment Services, which is a subsidiary and division of Hub International. On behalf of my Hub colleagues across the state, I'd like to welcome everybody and say that we are thrilled to be a part of this new series with Maine Today Media, Business Unusual. And we're thankful for our relationship and business and media partnership with the Press Herald. 2020 obviously was a year of great change, and everybody's life was impacted, both personally and in their business lives. And Business Unusual is a series that's going to be about what's next in our constantly evolving landscape and where the Maine community goes from here. As we go through this together, I want to ask you to keep us in mind as we are an available resource to you. We're always available to help navigate in uncertain times. This isn't really about our bottom line at Hub. It's really most about trying to help our community get through this together. And whether you've got needs in the area of human resources, risk management, or retirement solutions, our job is to help you get through this and get to the other side in any way we can. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mim Minichiello, my fund partner, and she'll kick it off. Thanks.
Thanks a million, Peter. Hey, everybody. As Peter said, I'm Mim Minichiello. I'm the president of employee benefits here at Hub International. Really happy to be here with this awesome panel and that I'm going to introduce you to in a few seconds here as we sort of talk about surviving and thriving during this tumultuous year. As Pete said, one of the great things about Hub, there's a bunch, but one of the great things I love is that we sort of have the permission, or maybe you'd call it a responsibility, to constantly drive towards what our clients' needs are going to be in the future. During this past year, the future might have been like 2 weeks from now because it was a kind of crazy year, which I'm sure you understand. But it's always about kind of, like I said, looking forward and anticipating risks. And every year we put together an industry outlook series, which is designed to help our clients navigate risks. 2020 was a year unlike no other. So as we looked forward, we were sort of cobbling together new solutions because old solutions may no longer apply, which I think you would all identify with. And so from my point of view, getting a group of creative thinkers around you who can provide trusted advice feels like, to me, one of the most crucial survival strategies. And that's why I'm really excited to have these three wizards with us today as we talk about, like I said, surviving and thriving in 2021. They cover three or four critical Maine industries: healthcare, real estate, manufacturing, and hospitality. So Nate Stevens, Peter Wright, and Jen Lever are here, and I'm just really excited to share this time with everybody. So if you guys go ahead and unmute yourselves, I'm going to ask you, I'll call you out here. Oh, sorry. Is that me? All right. I can hear it. If it's not bothering anybody else, then maybe you mute until it's your turn to talk. How about that? So Jen, all three of you, if I ask you, start by introducing yourself, where you work, what you do, and if you're not originally from Maine, what brought you to Maine? How about that?
All right. Jen Lever, I'm the president of Baxter Brewing in Lewiston, Maine, and actually grew up in Auburn, Maine. So brought back to Maine when I was 28 to pursue an operational career here in Maine, and joined the Baxter family 4 years ago.
Awesome. Nate.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Nate Stevens. I'm a partner and broker with the Boldest Company. We're a full-service commercial real estate firm with offices in Portland and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I grew up, born and raised in Portland, but like most people, when they graduate high school, I left, but then was drawn back to everything Maine has to offer, and I've been with the Boldest Company for 14 years now.
So totally get that. Peter.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Wright. I'm the president for Bridgeton and Rumford Hospital and Central Maine Healthcare's long-term care division. I was not born in Maine. I was born in New London, Connecticut. my father and mother worked for a government contractor that made submarines for the Navy. So we moved around a lot. When my dad passed away, we moved to New Jersey, which is where I went to high school, and then was really pretty psyched to get back to New England. So I came to Linden State College in 1990, and I've been in Vermont, New Hampshire, and most recently Maine ever since. Been here with Central Maine Healthcare since 2019.
Thank you so much, everybody. So to kick this off, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. I think in the beginning, I'll sort of ask all three of you to weigh in. And then in the audience, I'd love it if you'd go ahead and throw things into the chat or the Q&A, but and we'll pull them out when it's time to open it up and take questions. So I'm starting off with what COVID was like for you and your organization and for your industry. And if I could, Peter, you're on my left here, I'm going to start with you. So.
Sure. Well, obviously, everything that we knew came to a grinding halt in March. We were monitoring this on an international level, and then as it made its way into the United States, and then when we had the first COVID positive patient in the state of Maine hospitalized at our flagship medical center in Lewiston, everything changed. We had stood up our incident command system just prior, and I think as most people know, we really stopped doing everything that wasn't life or death necessary. And I think that those are the biggest changes. And over the subsequent 3 months, we learned how to operate in COVID. And even though we're a year later, we really opened up normal operations back in May. So it was a heck of a roller coaster ride with a lot of detail in between. But I think that's really how it affected us.
Jen, would you mind sharing your thoughts here about what COVID or pandemic was like for you and for Baxter family?
Yes. So we make a product, physical product that needs to be made on site. So as we really evaluated what was possible, and we had a couple of immune compromised folks that really wanted to get out of the building as soon as possible, and luckily happened to be in positions where that was a feasible thing while continuing to work. Trying to support the team through the uncertainty of a global pandemic, and while they're still needing to come and show up to work every day, is a difficult thing. I couldn't have the brewers go home and build their wort and bring the wort in. And so as people spoke about the luxury of being able to work from home, our team had a lot of discussions about how they were mentally feeling. And I think where everybody's mindset and mental state really became the primary conversation. Letting people choose if they were going to be laid off, and then determining how much work could we commit to with the people that were left and wanting to remain working. As people went through the pandemic, their beer consumption from an off-premise standpoint tended to increase with a lot of our partners, which gave us a unique business opportunity, as well as it became legal for us to deliver direct to consumer, which up until that point. So us having to adjust our business plan and create a website where you could order beer became a major focus of our first 60 days of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Nate, what did you see during the pandemic?
Yeah, so in our industry, I mean, I think what most people experienced, we did as well, which was a complete shutdown at the beginning. We were in the middle of a lot of transactions where folks needed real estate, whether it was an office building or an investment product that, we had to continue to provide those services. We were not listed as an essential business at first, which was a little frustrating because we need to physically get people into buildings. Not many people buy or lease a building without walking through it. So, when that finally came around, that opened things up for us. And at the end of the day, I don't think a lot changed at the Bolus Company. We're a consultative business, right? So we just continue to provide that advice to our clients. However, the industry for a lot of our clients did change. And so that was just even more important for us to offer that, whether, especially in, I guess, the office and retail worlds, which were most heavily impacted by everything. And so, at the end of the day, not a lot changed. We did obviously have to change some of our practice to just make sure everyone was safe and comfortable. But, just continuing those services was what was most important to us throughout 2020.
Let's talk about the big pivot. And I know that's one of those words that's starting to almost sound like a swear word, for goodness sake, when these things that we shouldn't get to say after this is over. But what's the biggest, maybe not shocking, but the biggest change that you had to deal with or implement or help your people survive in 2020? What's the hardest thing? Anybody?
I think I'll go first. I mean, easy. We're in healthcare, so analyzing what we could do in remote and what we couldn't do, trying to stand up technology like this so that we could make sure that we could get access to patients who were downright afraid and really fearful, to the point where people avoided care that ultimately could have, and in many cases did, make them sick or sicker. So making that adjustment, adjusting our environments, I think we learned a lot of how much people we are. Our work is we're people taking care of people. So the very nature of it is being close to others, being close to our patients, standing side by side. Performing an surgery in an operating room is essentially 4 people in a very small bubble. Creating lots of risk in today's environment. And then access, and I know we could all talk about the supply chain, which probably is its own separate, but access to critical supplies and working on the supply chain and making some very critical contingent plans that we had never thought we'd have to have those kind of conversations. So just on a top level, and then we had to, of course, screen everybody coming in the building. So technology, every day we had no idea what our workforce was going to be like. If someone had a fever, if someone had a cough, we may not know that until the morning. So so many different things, both front of the house and back of the house got turned upside down. I'll let the others chime in, but
I'll pull that thread just a second, Peter. Give me a little bit on the procurement journey, right? The finding the things that you needed. Jen, I'll probably ask you the same question, but how did you build the new solution when you couldn't find what you needed?
Yeah, all of a sudden, I'll take something simple but obvious, like a mask. Less than 10% on a normal day pre-COVID, less than 10% of our workforce would wear a mask. And so now we're 10x trying going through utilization. All of our visitors, plus the entire country, is trying to have get their hands on masks. The entire world, hand sanitizer. One of the very interesting things is the lack of a flu. It's amazing what happens when you wear a mask and wash your hands, of what kind of germs and viruses we can stay away from. So supply chain was critical. And with that, the very basic of economics, when everybody wants it, the price goes up. And there were definitely instances of price gouging. But what used to be a $10 box of gloves quickly became a $200 box of gloves. And so multiply that times everything that everybody wanted at every hospital. And we were just as irrational as the rest of the world, in that, a week's worth of gloves wasn't good enough, right? We wanted to make sure we had 3 months just in case.
Yeah.
And so adjusting our own behavior to not be part of the problem was quite tricky.
Oh, it's such a great line. I have to say, where you were talking about needing the masks and the lack of the flu, all I could think of is, I was just saying this weekend, it was a lovely privilege not to have a cold for like a year. I have to say, that was an awesome thing. So there's some pluses in this. Jen, talk to me about pivots for you. And I promise I'll stop using pivot if it's making you crazy.
I think the at-home delivery piece was a huge piece. Baxter was founded in 2011 and immediately partnered with distribution partners. So it was the first time that we were interfacing in that way with consumers, which there was something very special about it because we don't normally get that opportunity. But navigating how to effectively and efficiently deliver all over the entire state in my Pathfinder was a challenge I didn't anticipate in taking over the CEO role. So I think adjusting to, to Peter's point, day to day, making sure people understood if they didn't feel good, if they showed any sort of symptom, that they needed to own that. And I don't know whether or not it's men in general or just my particular team, but they tend to be tougher than a cold and whatever it might be. And they don't want to let each other down, which is an incredible trait. But in a time where any small symptom needed to be something that kind of got elevated, that was difficult. And I think the procurement of PPE to protect us was important, but also, didn't want to be part of the problem. I didn't want to buy far more gloves than we needed when the hospital's pulling off the same supply. That felt irresponsible. But in a role where it's my job to protect our team, there was a balance. I mean, there's definitely, I kind of tell everybody I'll do better through the next pandemic. There's no rule book on how to do it. But yeah, I think the delivery adjustment and really the idea that everyone's role was a flexible position. We knew at any given day or time, like I could be variety packing, brewers could be packaging and shipping, and the team's willingness to flex to that, I think, is really what was able to set us apart. We're used to changes, but this was definitely tested our strengths on our ability to flex and change.
I certainly recognize the deliver to home as sort of a logical way. How am I going to get my product out if I can't do it anymore? But how did you get that decision from, hey, I got an idea, to this is what we're going to do?
There was a lot of decisions being made where we couldn't really suss out whether or not it made sense or was going to pay off. You needed to really act now. Even the decision to mandate masks within our building, we made that decision prior to it being required. We made the decision to not allow vendors in prior to really anybody knowing how long this was going to last. I think that was probably one of the most challenging things, is we've got a lot of transparency top to bottom through our organization. And nobody was asking me, like, when is this going to be over? But the frustration was shared amongst the team about the unknown and not knowing, when this would be normal or what would be normal again and what that looked like. But yeah, decision to go to delivery was pretty much the day it was made legal. We were building the website. We were trying to figure out what routes we could cover within a day and how do we make it. It didn't, hindsight 2020, it didn't financially make sense, a lot of those routes and days, but we did the best with what the information we had in front of us. And I think that's something that we've learned to do better in this last year, is be a little forgiving on doing the best we can and being forgiving of ourselves and missteps along the way.
All I think of, because I'm a risk kid, so I'm like, okay, that was different. Am I covered? Were there accidents that came from that? So I'm like, we're alert every other word you say. So
yeah.
Nate, talk about you. What was your big pivot, or your industry's big pivot?
I'll use the word adjustment.
Yeah, good. Sorry, thank you.
For us and for our clients, it was the need for information from them. Obviously, as we got into the shutdown world, no one knew what was happening, where things were going. And so we felt, as an industry leader, it was our responsibility to try to answer these questions for folks. I mean, we didn't have any case studies to work from. We were just as blind as everyone else, but that's what people lean on brokers and people like Bolus Company for, is the information. So it was more articles, more often, and doing research into, for the restaurant world, what does sidewalk seating look like over the summer? What streets are going to be shut down? For the office world, it was, who works from the office, who goes home, what is the technology needed for that? How do you still get collaboration in the office space if everyone's on Zoom? And so, providing that information and that advice to our clients was, I think, our biggest adjustment. We've always done pretty significant market research, but it shifted obviously this year in terms of that research that we're providing to our clients. So, we conducted a COVID office impact study where we asked, I think it was 300 employers around Greater Portland, as to what are they doing? How is work from home going? what are their plans to bring people back in? What's their timeline? And just this information collecting so that we could better advise our clients, I think was our biggest adjustment. Some technology changes. We bought a really nice, expensive 3D virtual tour camera. So now which is, I think, great, because if we have a lot of out-of-state prospective buyers and tenants, and if they can do a virtual walkthrough to check a space out before coming to Portland, I think it's great. Or come to Maine, I think it's fabulous. So those are some of the big adjustments that we made. It's just really trying to help our clients, navigate these murky waters.
I'll stay in that theme of what you're doing differently. Were there additional practices, Nate, so to keep this going for me, of things that were urgently adopted that will now be part of a permanent strategy for you guys in 2021? Or maybe 2022?
And I think for us, or even in the industry as a whole, it is the flexibility of, virtual tours, Zoom meetings. There were some agents out there that were giving tours with, on Facebook Live or, on through chat. I think having that flexibility is what's going to continue. The work from home flexibility is, something that I think will continue. We'll see more and more employees back in the office, and I can elaborate on that all day, but having that flexibility to work from Zoom, I guess one of the good things to come out of this pandemic shutdown is now everyone, from ages 3 to 103 is comfortable with Zoom or whatever that platform is. And so that's really helped. But, at the end of the day, what people are missing is getting back around a conference table or, into the same room and collaborate and think on the same page is what we're missing. So some things will continue. We'll see a rebound on others as well. That's kind of my prediction.
That's good. Jen, how about you? What of the things you had put in place this past year do you think you're going to keep moving forward with in 2021 and 2022?
I think for us, we focused a lot more on just where our staff was at from a mental state, talking more about their feelings day in and day out. And there's no couch involved and mandatory therapy session, but just talking a lot about how things are going and putting the personal life pressures kind of at the forefront of a lot of the team meetings and conversations that we were having. My director of quality loves to say that there's two things that you need to make beer, people and yeast. And if those two things aren't being taken care of, we've got an issue. So luckily, our team really likes each other, and we all happen to be type A. So we really miss having the office support staff in the building. And I think everyone will be looking forward to that when we are able to join together again. But having people own what something's going on, and when we can flex the beer schedule or the packaging schedule around a life necessity item that they've got going on, I think is important, and it shows that we can do it. And why don't we if we can? And I think that our ability to adjust our plan based on those needs has made a really big difference with our current team. And I think it'll definitely support the tenure and growth of our team going forward.
Do you think you have to, I think through when I'm processing what you're saying, this idea of a schedule or a plan dictating what we're going to do, but I now hear you saying, okay, wait, it can flex and be successful. And that might've been a little surprising to you guys. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, beer is a living, growing organism, right? So as much as we want to put a beer into a tank and get that beer out of the tank the next day, it's like our people. Like, we need to listen to what the beer needs and whether that's yeast propagation or fermentation time. If our staff has a potential exposure or has a life event that they're trying to make work, and then being able to flex and put them on a shift where they're not around other people, or we need to just be overly precautious about everybody's health and well-being and stop any spread that we may be a part of. It's not a fluke chance that our team hadn't gotten COVID. People really took it responsibly and did the best they could. And the best that they could we've been fortunate up into through this point. I mean, but anyone at any time could have been, the cog in what shut us down. And I think people don't get into craft beer to make millions. They get into it because they're passionate about it. And our team really takes that responsibility seriously, and understanding that they're important. It makes a difference every single day they show up. They're important, and they're a part of letting us execute against what our overall business goals are.
The thing I might not have automatically known is the passion to put I'll call it the chemistry together, which I would have gotten from the craft beer experience. Sounds like maybe a newfound or just a profound respect for the people part of the process, which I don't think I would have expected. So that's really, thanks for sharing that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I guess I know the craft beer community to be a community in true form. I don't know that it would have gone into the process, the processing back shop, if you will, and it clearly does. So that's really neat, Jen.
Yeah.
Peter, there's some good chat, which I'm working a little bit in my right brain while I listen to you guys with what's left of my left brain. Talk to me about what you guys are, you're in the hot seat still, but what you guys are doing differently as you look forward for 2021, to revenue recovery and handling your people. And there's quite a bit to be done in the healthcare environment.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of myths out there as well. So, with the CARES Act, there was a lot of money targeted towards hospitals and healthcare providers. I think the one important point that was lost in all of that is the majority of that was a loan, and the repayment is starting next month. So we hold that on our books as a liability and are starting to pay that back. We learned a lot, and actually, I was truly impressed at how government was able to rise to the occasion in a timely fashion, which isn't something you often utter, when really needed to. And there were probably a dozen barriers standing in the way of telemedicine, whether it's having all the providers licensed, the technology, security. Every one of them came down in less than 24 hours. When the American Hospital Association reached out to the administration and said, we need all these to go away so that we can reach our patients, they were dropped the next day. And it just shows you it is possible, right? We've seen a lot of very good trends, the use and comfort of the patient with telemedicine, the use of the providers and staff. That went way up in the spring and early summer. As we started to get to a point where people were moving around in the summer and we knew more about the virus and weren't afraid of certain things, we saw that drop. We saw utilization drop. But perhaps the best thing that we saw is a very steady and consistent 25 to 30% drop in emergency department utilization, which needed to happen. Particularly in New England, emergency departments are the safety net. And so if you don't have a primary care provider, or you don't have access, or it's a weekend, you just go to the emergency department. And what the general population clearly learned was, well, I'm not going there. It's not a good idea. And they discovered urgent cares. They discovered, well, let me just call my primary care provider. Technology, apps. There's just been a lot of creativity brought to the marketplace that have shifted utilization and saved money. And so I think that's a big part of our future, the way we engage with patients, and just like everybody else commented, the way we engage with our team. We have 3 hospitals, 2 long-term care facilities, 45 clinic sites, and 2 urgent care locations. We have a lot of different places that we need to see and communicate with people. And this type of technology showed us we can do it quickly. And then more people will engage. We hold, forums for our teams where people would come in person. We would get 20, 30, maybe even 40 or 50. We do it digitally in each location. We do it digitally, and we would get a couple of hundred people per opportunity. So there were certainly some great takeaways, things we will continue to do in the future. And that make us more efficient and better at what we do.
Let me ask a follow-up on telemedicine. Are there different, I'm interested, are there practices that were surprisingly using telemedicine? And then my related question is, are there technological investments that you've now got to make? Is the camera vibrant enough? Do you have enough bandwidth? Like, how did you I'm assuming that's an ongoing thing that you've got to work your way through too, right?
Yeah, so let me start with the investments. One of the things we quickly learned is very few people have the camera on their PC. If they're
I
not-
have one that adds extra wrinkles, just in case you guys are wondering. That's how mine works. Clearly,
I
I'm
bought the slimming version. So we had to get more of those, and of course everybody wanted them, so that was complicated. And those are just office staff. Some folks have a laptop, so it has an integrated camera. Other folks use terminals, and so whether they're mobile or fixed in a nurse's station, it was hard for them to engage. They could log on, listen, type questions. Bandwidth, we certainly had to look at how we were creating the pipeline, how we were bifurcating our pipeline for certain uses, and who was using it, and make adjustments. And something that we've been very active both in our local community, but as well as Washington, D.C. And the president's new bill is going to come out with a lot of internet access in rural areas. Is, we don't have the luxury to kind of say, well, we cover 75% of the population or 85%. We have to get to the last house on the last mile of that dirt road. There are still people using dial-up. And I'll wait while that annoying sound of dial-up resonates in everybody's brain. And there are some people who don't even have cell phone access. So lots and lots of barriers in rural area, particularly on the western slope. And it's no different than every rural area across the country. We're lucky, we're not really rural. I have a colleague who runs the hospital in Guadalupe County, New Mexico. And they are literally 200 miles away from another medical center. They're rural. The frontier of Alaska, that's rural. So we learned a lot. We learned a lot from each other, and we've seen a lot of unlikely partnerships. The other part of your question was who is doing it really well? Quite frankly, CVS. The Cvs Minute Clinic had hardwired telemedicine into their Minute Clinics 10 years ago. And actually what they found out was, particularly with a younger population, the patients were more engaged in their visit with telemedicine, because as they would use an otoscope to look at someone's ear or to look in their throat, not only would that video image be projected to the clinician who was in some other state, some other place, but they had a video screen so the patient could see that. And all of a sudden, the patient could see what the provider would see, and they understood. And their level of engagement was much higher, and their level of satisfaction was much higher. And so shout out to them. But the level of innovation across health systems and how we use this technology is really phenomenal and rapidly evolving. Whether it's phone or iPad or computers, whether it's with patients or clinician to clinician, or the transmit of data. We're now seeing it inside of ambulances, inside of helicopters. It's still a little bit rare, but it's really starting to take off. And I think this was the catalyst that was needed to really drive innovation, which will inevitably be both in the healthcare industry, but also partners and innovators like Amazon and Microsoft.
I can't predict this, but one of the thoughts that occurs to me when you're talking about is what's the retrenchment factor? Like, once we sort of get back to normal, what are the things that we go back to? And I wonder in telemed, it all depends on what the access looks like and all the other things you just talked about. We have serious impediments to telemed when you're on dial-up or you're not on anything. It doesn't work that way. So
yeah, no doubt the pendulum will continue to swing in both directions. Right now, a year later, everybody wants to be in person. And a lot of that is there's a clinical benefit, not a physical clinical benefit, but the mental health of our patients and our staff. We are, the human race is a species of people that need that human interaction. We just don't do well, whether you're introverted or extroverted. You don't do well when you're isolated. So I hope that we continue to see an uptick in utilization of healthcare via telemed. But no doubt we need a little bit of the swing back to regulate the mental health impact of what we've done over the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's a big conversation, mental health among people in my businesses. They're helping employers navigate because they're now in a conversation they never used to be in before. So I see that too. So let me ask you to speak on behalf of your entire industry. Ready? Light load, you guys. Nate, I'm coming your way first. So as you take a look at real estate, corporate real estate in Maine in 2021 into 2022, what are you, sort of warning people about, worried about, happy about? Tell me what your forward-looking lens looks like there.
Yeah, thanks for moving into the future here. What I talked about was, earlier was advice and information for our clients, like it's in the past tense. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. Mostly with retailers, restaurateurs, office occupiers, and investors. And so, we just need to continue offering, as much information as we can to advise a lot of the office occupiers, what is that return to the office going to look like? And that's what 2021 is really, I think, going to bring for us, for what we offer to our clients. And for restaurant uses, what is the industry going to look like this summer? When the vaccine does kind of get into a full roll, what is that going to look like? So there's still a lot of uncertainty, even with that light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's what I kind of see moving into the next 3 or 4 months at the very least. Do I think it's going to be this rush back into the office space? No, it's going to be a little bit more organic than that. Here in Maine, we're a little different. It's a smaller towns, smaller industries, smaller city. And so, I think when you're reading all these articles, in the New York Times, the LA Times about this back to the office movement, maybe, ours is a little more simple. We don't have 30,000 people trying to get in and out of an office building in downtown Portland. Companies are smaller. And so I think it might be a little bit easier and a little bit more organic for, those in Maine getting back into the office. In the restaurant world, I think we're still going to have to answer questions about what outside dining looks like, what capacity is going to look like moving into the summer. Everyone's very optimistic. I think, one of the busier industries right now, believe it or not, is restaurant spaces. There, I think in downtown Portland, been 4 or 5 restaurant leases signed in the last, 2 weeks, which is really great news.
That is great.
And it just shows a lot of optimism in that industry. But once again, still some uncertainty. No one quite knows what this summer is going to look like. So that's what I really see happening in the next 3 to 4 months.
I definitely hope there's a burger from a restaurant in my future. I'm sorry, that was just me.
And everyone wants to get back out, right? I mean, I think that's
definitely
what the restaurant industry is hoping, is that, everyone's been bottled up for a year and I haven't been out to eat in 365 days. Well, I'm going to go out to eat 7 nights a week now. So,
I know my children are anxious to someone else to cook. I can tell you that for sure.
Exactly.
That's a good one, Nate. Jen, play a couple of roles for me, Jen, because you've got the manufacturing point of view and you've also got a lens into hospitality and restaurants too. So go both ways. What do you see for the industry, if you would speak on behalf of both of them, my friend?
Two pretty critically charged industries that are, I think last year, the perspective of the summer was in trying to remain positive and not get into the weeds of this is happening to us. It's happening to us collectively as humans. So enjoy Maine because it's the only summer you're ever going to have without the tourists. And also, I think the appreciation that we all have in both industries for tourism and what it does and for the state and the money that it brings in. And, it's amazing to be experiencing tourists, seeing Maine for the first time and to play a role in that, whether it's the restaurant or beer experience. All indications from the restaurant perspective is everyone's ready. Bookings are incredibly high already in Bar Harbor, Booth Bay, all the summer, traditional summer coastal places. So that's exciting. And as our team's out there and hearing more about people's ability, there's just things that were off the table as far as what was possible. We can't do outdoor dining. We can't serve here. We can't ship beer. There's a lot of things that 14 months ago were in the category of can't or don't have the funding. I think the state has done a good job trying to reach all levels of brewery sizes and changing what's possible to having people in if they're tap room only. The flexibility of the amount of breweries that have gone to cans that were just draft only when they had consumption on site is a considerable change. We've only had 2 breweries shut down in the last year. And by every indication, they sounded as if they were going to close regardless of a pandemic, just kind of sped that up. And we've had several more open than have closed. So I think that's exciting. I think the craft brew industry in general it's a labor of love. It's a manual job that, you know, live to work and work to live. Like most craft brew people, they work to live, but they love what they do. And I think it's a unique thing that they haven't been able to share their beer and their ideas in the same way with their patrons. I think everybody's very anxious to do that. The optimism around how this summer is I've heard nothing but positive things from restaurants and from breweries. Everybody really believes that this summer is going to be the biggest yet. So I think everyone's really ready and really wants to be united in ways that haven't been so foreign, you know, that have been pretty foreign over the last year. And I think outdoor events and activities are going to play a major role in our experience in getting back together, particularly this summer more so than ever. I think even our investment in Baxter, not necessarily industry-wise, but investment in the Baxter Outdoors events and how people are engaging with our brand has been pretty critical to redefining what's possible for how do you have beer at an event and make it so that it's not all about consumption and have activities with safe consumption and being mindful of giving back. And I think restaurant owners are doubling down their efforts to make sure that the local beers are what's on tap. We have so many people coming into the state already that are here to experience craft beer, but I think there's a heightened appreciation for how many people are trying to stay open and keep their business alive and try to thrive through this. And macro beers and brands are becoming less of a priority. And I think for some folks, for on-premise at least.
I don't have the data behind this, but it seems to me if I weathered a storm with a business partner like Baxter, I might be inclined to make sure that I don't let that go, you know, as time goes on. That's what would occur to me. So
yeah,
I hope that's the case for you. Peter, let's talk about the easy world of the industry of healthcare. I think you did hit quite a few of them, so I won't grill you horribly, but as you look forward, you know, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just want to get back to something that Jen said about the forecast. So when you go back and look at the recorded pandemics in history, there is always this echo boom effect, and it is a largely a large swath of time that is spent in the public, that is spent celebrating, that is spent human to human, enjoying things like food and spirits, and it's a predictable response to what's going to happen as a way to compensate for what people went through. And for us, you know, we're the healthcare system, but if we're honest, we're really a sick care system. It's how we function. We're trying to transition to a healthcare system, to being compensated and motivated to be preventive. And certainly we're more focused on that today than we have been, knowing what happens. The stark reminder in the last year of, geez, if you don't come into that cancer screening, we're really worried, because the sad reality of the pandemic was indeed the patients who suffered from COVID who were in the ICU, but it was also the people who skipped over their screenings in the spring and the summer, and that we are seeing, that we saw in the fall, and now we're seeing, and they're sick or sicker, and sometimes beyond our ability to ensure for them the maximum recovery for that. So
yeah, that's tragic. Yep.
Yeah, so we're it's part of everybody's focus to make sure that we're prevention and getting ahead of things is rule number one. Transitioning the consumer behavior and really focusing on primary care. We're a high value healthcare system. Our prices are lower per patient because of the projects that we've worked on over the decades. And we're really driving that home. If you were to say, what are our top service lines, that we really invest in? Primary care comes up first every single time. And we're doubling down on primary care through our own investments, but also our partnerships with other primary care providers in our accountable care organization who are high performers, places like an FQHC in the central Maine area called DFD Russell. Our other areas of, cardiovascular and cancer, we're making huge investments. We're in the process of a $30 million a new cancer center in Lewiston, Auburn on our campus that had started its planning prior pandemic, but we didn't really lose any steam throughout that. The planning and the construction delayed just a tiny bit, but we unfortunately have a high cancer rate. We unfortunately have a high cardiovascular disease rate. So those are all the areas that we're not only planning to be more active, not just in the treatment, but in the prevention side. Telemedicine and providing tons of education to people about, look, we have a motto. The president of our medical group, Dr. Jason Krupp, loves to say, call, click, or come on in, right? That's to say, engage with us in a way that is helpful for you. And that provides value to you as the consumer. So we have, robust telephone service now. We've made investments in that service area, our online scheduling, our online interaction, telehealth, and of course, you can still come in. And an important point, throughout the entire pandemic, throughout all the hospitals, nobody got sick. It was the safest place to be. I was saying earlier, it was safer to be at a hospital or a doctor's office than it was to be, I won't pick on my favorite grocery store, but at a grocery store or at Walmart or places where they weren't always wearing masks. So I think it's a badge of honor and pride that our healthcare facilities were incredibly safe, and the diligence that went into that will continue.
I like that. The diligence will continue. I think that is a great headline. Someone in the questions, I'm going to move over to questions. I know I left maybe some of the things I was thinking about, but we're getting towards the back end of the hour here, and I want to get the questions in. Someone asked about your organization's core values and how that impacted your decision making. Does anybody have a point of view on that? They'd be up for sharing.
I can certainly get started. I mean, that's where your core values, oftentimes you say core values, well, we've defined them, they're on our website, right? That's not your core values. Your core values are what your customers say about you when you're neck deep in a pandemic. How do you react and treat them? And so our customers tell us what our core values are. And when the pressure cooker gets tight, those were tested, and sometimes we had to reset, but it was our guiding light. We started every day reminding, what's our mission? What are we here for, and who are we? And we're people taking care of people. So we stayed focused on our team and our patients, and that's, as I said in that box, the only reason we're here today is because that's what we relied on.
Sure.
I think for us, it gave us the opportunity to dial in, actually redefining our core values. Baxter had been established on 10 pillars that were pretty lengthy and not necessarily wildly memorable. And so as we tried to capture internally how we felt about the brand, and that really shaping our core values, the way I looked at the core values piece wasn't necessarily how our customers felt about us. I felt like it needed to start internally first, and that messaging needed to be clear. And so whether I was there or not there, I wanted anybody in the organization to be able to say, I know this is what we feel, what we care most about. So personal safety, then food safety, quality, and continuous improvement were our 4 pillars. And we shaped our entire annual goals and strategy around those 4 pillars. And we're able to put together in a way that we had never done before, just celebrating our 10-year anniversary in January. That probably seems ridiculous, but we hadn't. So that, needed to own that, and putting up goals and then celebrating those achievements, I think is going to be critical to how we do business going forward. And I think it earmarks a huge change for us and is setting us up to have our best year we've ever had, regardless of the pandemic. So
maybe you didn't set out to be a best places to work, but it sounds like you're living in that.
Yeah, we certainly have the long-term aspirations of being a B Corp, but got to walk before we run, so to speak. So, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and not because you're seen doing it, is something that's been pretty a good guide for us as we move forward and transition to what life looks like when a normal is realized.
Nate, your core values and how it impacted your decisions.
Yeah, we were lucky that we went through a core values exercise at our company, maybe about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago. So we and the company had our core values fresh in our mind, and a lot of what Peter said, what came first was the client and the customer, and what's best for them. And so that really led all of our decisions in 2020 was, what can we do to help our clients be the best, that they can, no matter what the industry is. And specifically one of our core values is collaboration. And maybe that took on a slightly different definition in 2020. I think, we had established that as a core value to just be a little bit more innovative within the office and solving problems and transactions. But what I took away as collaboration in 2020 was, everyone in the office played a part, from the admins to the managing director to all the producers. Everyone played a part in terms of thinking on their feet. How can we adjust? I won't say the P word. And, that's what I found as collaboration. So maybe some of our core values took on different definitions in 2020, but having those, we were really lucky that we had just gone through that as exercise. And I suggest that all companies kind of go through that exercise, and it can take some time, and you have some difficult conversations, but it was really important, that we were able to lean on that in 2020 and really kind of focus on our customers and clients.
It's great stuff. It's funny how the stuff on the wall sometimes resonates, sometimes doesn't, but really when you see it put into play, like I'm watching each of you talk about it, and it's such an authentic display of it actually does matter. I think that's the attributes of companies that last. Nate, I've got a specific question for you. Someone asked us about the fact that more people are moving into Maine from out of state, but they can work remotely. And so how are you and your team envisioning working spaces going forward? What is it looking like? What are you seeing people ask for, if you will, as they return to work?
Yeah, thanks. And I think the question was specific to co-working, but we have seen an influx of folks from out of state come to Maine, and a lot of them, management of their offices. So CEOs, CFOs, et cetera, moving to Maine, whether that's part-time or full-time. And I do think that there'll be an increase in the need for co-working. I know that was hit pretty hard in 2020, but I think I'll see that bounce back, because let's be honest, working from home is fun once in a while, but all the time is not fun. So having a place to go to get out of the house with no distractions will really be a big part of the next 12 months. And with any trend, obviously we were forced into this work from home trend. There's a rebound, right, to something that's more comfortable. So we're not going to go back to the way that we were pre-pandemic, but having 95% of your workforce working from home is not a long-term solution as well. So it's going to bounce back, it's going to rebound, and there's going to be a mix between the two. Are you going to have 100% of your employees in the office every day? Probably not. And it's different for every industry. If you're a marketing company or architectural firm, and that collaboration and being around a table is so important, you might have a larger workforce from home. But it provides that flexibility in terms of how each employer wants to work differently with their employees.
I think return to work is certainly something that we are talking about a ton in my world here as people figure that out. Oh, someone popped up a poll, which was not me. Do you prefer to work from home? So why doesn't everyone pitch in that answer? And then Strawberry, maybe you can feed it to me once that comes back. I think the flexibility to have work from home or not, and actually I know Peter and Jen, you have a little bit less flexibility here, but one of the things that someone did ask about was how did you navigate the determination that somebody could work from home, aside, Peter, from the obvious ones that you can't do surgery in your basement, but how did you guys figure out who was going to get to work from home, if you will?
For Baxter, it really was a role dependent as far as working from home. I mean, a brewer was not working from home, packager, warehouse. The HR, I needed to get her out of the building as soon as possible so she could help keep us alive and look at all the programs that were out there. So accounting and HR were really some of the only options for full-time work from home. Unfortunately, fortunately, it depends on what your perspective is, but yeah, there's a badge of honor to some degree that I think folks that work in industries that you couldn't work from home, that there's an element that as people celebrated this work-life flexibility and redefining what was possible, that if you work in a job that you have to be there to work, there's just another element of stress and the unknown of the pandemic that I think the brewing industry definitely felt, and trying to support both pieces, and then support the idea of giving everybody what they need when you're used to being able to interface with them. How do you lead them in a way over Zoom? You know, the connection, the human connection element is just lost, and to some degree, there's a wonderful flexibility about it, and the telemedicine's been super convenient for our staff. But there's no roadmap, and just doing the best we can and making sure that as people's days and weeks were good or bad, that they were being very transparent with that, so I could try to adjust and be understanding of whatever audience I might be talking to.
I'm realizing that I'm getting close to the end here, Peter, so I'm gonna pivot, and there's my begin to wrap us up here. So I promised that I would ask this question, which I think I already know the answer to, but as we leave the pandemic behind us and look forward into 2021, I stole this from you, Jen, but what is the one pandemic word that you'd most like to get rid of? Pivot! Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
That was a Friends reference in case anybody thinks I just had some sort of medical event. That's all that was. Sorry. Jen, you go.
Yeah, I mean, pivots probably, up until the pandemic, I associated pivot with a softball swing. But it works, and it's probably frustrating because it's so often used and it applies to so many things that we've all done. But yeah, someone just said the new normal. I think, there'll be memes and jokes for decades to come about living and thriving and surviving through this, just like how we looked back on the ice storm in '98. We thought losing power and not taking showers was the worst it was going to get. Now that seems like a cakewalk. So yeah, I think if I could retire pivot, I'd probably retire that for a couple of years.
That's awesome. Peter, what are you going to throw away? What's the word?
Well, I don't follow directions, so my team would tell you that. So I can't be just one word. And Lisa and Courtney nailed it before I could say it, but I want to get rid of "you're on mute."
Yes, so true. Except I am. Nate, what are you going to dump?
WFH, work from home.
Got it.
Yeah, we don't need to hear that anymore.
Got it. Sounds like something else anyway. Cool.
At least that's what all my clients want. Get back to the office.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll take the last minute here and say thank you so much to the audience. You had great comments and questions coming through there. I really appreciate that. And I want to say thank you so much to the panel. You guys clearly plowed into this thing. It was really great getting to hang out with you for an hour and kind of look forward at where we're going and what we're doing. I pulled a quote for you, knowing I was talking about you. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. That's Winston Churchill. And I think the courage and generosity, the courage to lead and the generosity that you guys all exhibited here for us today is just terrific insights. And for everybody watching Maine Today Media, thanks so much for the partnership here. We're really pleased to be part of the Business Unusual series. For us, it's always about trying to surround yourself with the people who can help you with innovative strategies and be a trusted advisor. And I'm hoping that you all have a web of people like Peter, Nate, and Jen around you to deliver that very support to be successful. So again, thanks very much to Maine Today Media. Check out Business Unusual April 7th, because that's coming up. And for everybody watching today, I wish you a really prosperous 2021. Thanks very much, everybody.